Ngā waka katoa o te moana nui a kiwa e tau mai nei ki Aotearoa. Tēnā koutou huri noa I tō tātou ruma. Good morning, and I'm absolutely delighted to have this opportunity again. I was here at the first course last year and reincarnated in a different ministerial personality this year. And I really consider this now to be a priority for me, no matter what role I have in any year, because it is so important that we grow, and I was interested in hearing both speakers as I came in, not only grow capability of Pacific leaders, but yes, a Pacific capable, not just public service, private sector, and Aotearoa, New Zealand as a Pacific nation. Can I just introduce my personal filmmaker, Florence Fuimauno Aiono, who joined my office yesterday in my press and media group, and Ofania Ikuia, who is from the Ministry of Pacific Island Affairs and who is my Pacific advisor in my office. Okay, so apparently my brief this morning is to be inspirational and motivational. So I'm not sure you'll be the judge of whether or not I've achieved that. But I thought that I would just talk a little bit about my background and what my aspirations are, and happy to take, if there's any time left, because I really can suck oxygen out of a room, if there's any time left, I am happy to take any advice from you or any comments. And if not today, then you should feel free to email me or just send me your ideas, or any of my staff. I run a very open shop and try to listen to and hear as many points of view as possible. I'm mindful of my background because this past weekend I spent in Ruatoria. So I'm Ngāti Parau on my mother's side, and I'm Ngaitahu on my father's side. So my Parata name is my family name, it's not my married name. I got married quite late for Polynesian people. I got married in my mid-30s, and I remember my husband, all his tribe coming to our wedding, and immediately after the wedding, all his aunties and grand aunties rushed up onto the marae to hug me and say, "Oh, Mrs. Gardner." And it had not occurred to me to change my name at all. I said, "Oh no, I'm not taking Gardner, I'm keeping my own family name." And they said, "But why did you marry him?" And I said, "For his body." But no. Anyway, what was the point of that? Oh, right. So I'm Parata on my Ngaitahu side, which is from Dunedin, all around there. And I'm Redi Ngārimu on my mother's side, which is all around the east coast. I'm one in a family of 10. There are 5 girls and 5 boys in my family. There's exactly 20 years between the oldest and the youngest. Our baby sister was born when we were having my big brother's 20th birthday party. And one brother and one sister were whāngai to cousins of my mother who could not have children. And so it's always intrigued me, the surrogacy debate, and all the ethics of whether or not you should rent a womb and things like that. And I always think our cultures have the answers within them already, if only we cared to look around. So my brother and sister, although they grew up in a different part of the country, called my aunt and uncle their mother and father, they knew from as soon as their awareness or cognition developed in them that, you know, they were our brothers and sisters and we were part of the same whānau. So there were no ethics, no identity crisis. Every now and again my sister will say to us, "Oh, you know, I envy that." And we go, "What? You grew up with only one other, we grew up with 7 others, you know, what are you moaning about?" Anyway, and I grew up in Ruatoria. On today's nomenclature, that would be negative decile 1, right? All my schooling was in little schools, not unlike Pacifica villages around the Pacific. They were 98% Ngāti Parau, not Māori, you know. 98% of our roll was Ngāti Parau, about 1% would be other Maoris, and 1% would be Pākehā or Pālangi. And even the McDonalds and Sutherlands, blonde and blue-eyed though they were, just assumed that they were the normal part of our community. So I grew up in a very strong and loving whānau environment, and again when I look back over my career when I've been writing policy or now in Parliament arguing it, and how easily whānau trips off the tongue, you know, parents, family, whānau, we need a whānau oriented and all of those kinds of things. And I know as someone who grew up in it and am a practising whānau member that it is as demanding as it is full of gifts, that it is not an easy grouping to be a part of or to create and to sustain, particularly in these really atomised or nuclear type arrangements that we find ourselves a part of. And I'm mindful of the comment I heard you making where you feel like you're an appendage to a system, and how do you constantly keep making changes and advice. And that is because, of course, we all come from a different cultural infrastructure. And our norm is significantly different from the practising norm, and notwithstanding these terms and concepts that again trip easily off the lips of diversity and inclusiveness and ethnicity and language and identity and culture and all of those, making them a practical part of our everyday lives and work, and doing so in a way where you are constantly the minority, so you are constantly aware of what the differences are and making those differences real and visible, while striking the balance between persuasion and aggression, which is very hard sometimes because your tolerance level of other people's ignorance or just plain indifference can get really stretched. So I was speaking at our Runanga Hui yesterday. Last year when I was the Minister of Energy and Resources, you may remember I was talking about the opportunities of oil and gas and minerals exploration. And now that I'm the Minister of Education, I am being clasped back to the welcoming boom of my iwi, going, oh, thank goodness you're not that minister now, you're this minister. And what I was saying at yesterday's Runanga was that you know, I expect that they will love me regardless of the positions I hold at any one time, because family and whānau is enduring. And we take our harshest criticism from those closest to us, and the reciprocal obligation is that they love us no matter what. So I'm saying to them. And also I was speaking in the marae, or the meeting house that I was most familiar with, and which was a lot of my learning ground. I learned karanga there, I learned waiata there, I learned to speak Māori in practical community situations there. I learned to be able to get on my feet like I am now and talk to an audience, because actually what I've found is that Māori audiences, and increasingly Pacifica ones, although you guys are harder to read, are actually more demanding than regular audiences, because we have a high expectation of not only getting information and maybe education, but actually being entertained and connected with as well. And that isn't often a requirement in the wider environment. And so standing in Kapohanga, Arangi, my whanenui, and looking around and seeing all the carvings and tuku and things like that, I often pinch myself whether I'm here speaking in Parliament, speaking to the United Nations, speaking to the World Bank, wherever. I think this is where I got my training, here in Ruatoria, actually in a satellite suburb of Ruatoria at Hiruharama, you know, in a little meeting house carved by my tipunas with photos of all the people to whom I have connections, and they are the ones that travel with me wherever I go. So that cultural kind of cloak, if you like, is something that's really direct and personal and meaningful to me. Because we all know, no matter how far we go, no matter what promotions or experiences we have, it is our family who attend our birthdays, our weddings, our christenings, hopefully in that order, our tangies, right? That they are the ones that are going to be there there no matter what. And so remaining true to those connections and to those relationships, I think helps me anyway, both have an anchor and a compass for how I carry out my public life. It's also imbued in me a very strong sense of self-determination, self-direction, self-responsibility, a very strong, actually it's an anathema to dependence on the state, which may sound ironic because a very big part of my career has been working within government departments or working for governments, whether here or overseas, and now I'm a very proud member of this 50th Parliament and of this Cabinet. But my whole professional life, whether in the private or public sector, has been about how do we create an environment in which people can be successful for themselves and for their families and for their communities. How they can be independent of the state, except for those functions that only the state should be performing: defence, policing, managing of the delivery of health and education. But apart from that, I absolutely believe that it saps all the beauty inside of who we are if we are constantly living on a two-week relationship with the state. A dependent relationship, not a negotiated relationship, a dependent relationship. And so when we think about the welfare system and the disproportionate number of Māori and increasingly Pacifica families that rely on the state, to me that is a direct correlation with the powerfulness or powerlessness that we have to make self-directed decisions for ourselves and for our families. Because we are always negotiating away who makes decisions about what it is we can or can't do. And increasingly I am getting concerned, and I said this at last year's leadership program, I really encourage you all to have a look at the development pathway of Māori in this country and then skip a few chapters, okay? There have been differences in that development pathway, obviously, between Pacific experiences and Māori experiences. So starting with the fact that we are tangata whenua here, going on to the laws that have actually banned specific parts of our culture. I am the daughter of a mother who was banned from speaking her own language. We were not allowed to speak it in our own home because my father, who did not speak Māori, absolutely bought into the whole belief system that speaking a second language would be detrimental to our abilities to be successful, which research has completely disproved. And so there have been differences, and that therefore that has created, the alienation of land and all of those. So those have created differences. But I think one of the learnings of the Māori story for Pacific communities is to maintain what is yours or ours now, rather than losing it, then advocating to the state to restore it, and then expecting that the government will become, for instance, the Bank of Pacific Languages, or the Bank of Pacific Cultures, or the Bank of Pacific Social Structures, or whatever. And when I say bank, I don't just mean funding, I mean the repository of, the carer of, the keeper of. So I'm getting now, as Minister of Pacific Island Affairs, lots of advocacy for the role of the state in terms of Pacific languages. And I absolutely believe that we have a role and a responsibility. But I do not want to see Pacific languages go the way that Māori language has gone, and I'm hoping to try and get a detour in there as well, which is that it fundamentally starts to become an academic language if the main vehicle of it is the school or academic institution. I am a second language learner of te reo, ironically, because I grew up in a community where the main language of communication of my parents and my aunts and uncles and my grandparents was Māori. And it was happening around me all the time. And we never learned to speak. I had to go to school and university to learn how to speak Māori. It was actually quite detrimental because I realised that I understood almost all Māori, which means I didn't actually have to listen to grammar instruction or any language acquisition instruction. I could pass exams without having to do that. But what I developed was an academic way of speaking Māori. I wrote my master's thesis in Māori. It was a political statement to say, you universities have to work out how you can mark my work in my language, right? But I read it now and I can't work out what I was saying. Because it's so academic as to be an artefact of a time and, yeah, and a political statement more than actually a vehicle for the expression of language. Now, there's nothing wrong with academic language, because even in English we have academic English and we have community English and, you know, parliamentary English and so on and so forth. The point I make about all of this is that we know that language, identity and culture provides the strongest platform for the acquisition and the growth of a successful life. If you know who you are, if you have a strong sense of where you're connected, if you have a way of describing your world and perceiving the world, then you already have a head start in anything else that you might want to do. And coming from little old Ruatoria gave me that background. And the expectation from my parents, by the way, I come from a home which we never ever owned. I didn't know that our house wasn't ours, that it belonged to the government. We never owned a car, and all the time we were growing up. And we've often talked as brothers and sisters, how on earth did we get to everything? You know, because Ruatoria is to this day not served by a public transport system. And so clearly uncles and aunts carted us around in pre-safety belt days. You know, 5, 6, 10 of us in the back of trucks or utes or cars or whatever to get to this event or that event. And we went to all those events. Our parents made sure we were in the tennis club and the, you know, netball club and football club and rodeo and St. Brownies, Girl Guides and St. John's and all those kind of community type activities that were available at the time. While also going to every christening, wedding, 21st, unveiling, you know, whatever. Worshipping in every entity, according to whether it was the Anglican minister who happened to be there, or the Latin minister who happened to be there, or the Mormon minister who happened, whatever. So, you know, we were agnostic as to which brand conveyed our prayers, you know, as long as we were having those prayers. Learned to sing hymns, you know, and even at Waitangi past weekend, notwithstanding the disservice the media showed us by capturing only the ragtail mob of protesters who broke through and completely ignoring, you know, some fabulous things that went on. But the church service at 5 AM on Waitangi morning was just beautiful for no matter where you were educated, and I see and experience this when I go to Pacific church services as well, just that united ability to sing in accord without hymn books, or to pray in accord without prayer books. And all of that is part and parcel of who we are, and we make choices about how much of that is part and parcel of who we are, and that is as it should be. Anyway, I'm now a mother of 2 girls, 15 and 18, and I have huge aspirations for them and for their generation. I have a very strong conviction about the role we play while we are playing our role, that it is purely a link between those who went before us and those who will come after us. But we have responsibilities, and I practice what I preach. I wanted my girls to be Māori speakers from birth, so we upped sticks and moved home to Ruatoria when they were born, and we spent 5 years there making sure that Te Reo Māori was their first language, that they knew and loved their grandmother and their aunts and uncles and their first cousins, second cousins, third cousins, fourth cousins. They knew the whakapapa, that they pay out of their pocket money to the marae that they affiliate with, so that they know they can't be there for the working bees. There are other ways that they keep recording their commitment to their home base. And so I don't design, well, I design policy often for the theoretical person because they're perfect. You find that on your computer when you're talking about what kind of health pathway want to, you know, design, or what kind of housing provision or economic development or enterprise culture, that you and your computer focus only on the best in the people or the population or community we know and love. And that's who we write policy for. Because the reality is so dispiriting many times. We get out and we meet our people, and, you know, notwithstanding having described all of this, you know, I have cousins who exhale, as they say, and don't smoke. You know, so the difference between behaviour and what you're saying, and I keep saying to them, you have to do what you're asking your kids to do, you know? And you can't be saying, and don't hit your brother while you're bashing your kid. You know, it is just not aligned behaviour. Anyway, so we have many challenges. And my experience initially as a policy analyst within the New Zealand government, and I've served in a number of government departments, was a very lonely one. I would have been amongst a handful at most across the state sector, not just in my department, across the state sector, who was Māori, practicing Māori, and also involved in policy design, right? Because we, Polynesians, I think have struck quite a strong cultural orientation to service, and for that it means actually meeting and working with the people we are serving. That has tended to be why so many of us are concentrated in the operational service supply implementation side, but factually the powerful side is the policy side. Factually, if you are making the rules, then that's what goes out and influences the whole business. If you are designing the machine, then that's what goes out and influences everyone around you. If you are a service provider, and I am not saying there is anything wrong with that, but there's only so many of us, and if we want to exponentially express our power and influence, then that will happen more readily in policy and in management and leadership than it will in service. That won't change the expectation of our communities. I remember when I was General Manager of the Housing Corporation, still getting phone calls from Auntie Sophie or whatever saying, "Dear, you know my house up the Wharepunga Road? Well, it's leaking. What are you going to do about it?" You know, I'm in charge of the entire mortgage portfolio. Or when Witter and I ostensibly went on our honeymoon up to the north, and we stopped at Walkworth to fill up. We were just laughing about this on the weekend. And he gave his credit card to pay for the petrol, and the person came rushing out and said, "You Witter Gardner, you here to Puni Kōkiri?" And Witter said, "Yeah." And he said, "Oh, well, I want to tell you about my auntie's house, you know, over here in Warkworth, and and your department is useless, and blah, blah, blah." Witter said, "Oh, Taiho gets on the phone, get a housing officer, you know, blah, blah, you need to fix this up this weekend, blah, blah," you know, come off the phone. He goes, "Oh, chirp, right?" Or the other thing we were remembering was that we're sitting in the Waitangi Copthorne, you know, having an ostensibly romantic candlelit dinner in the big dining room. The lights are low, there's about to be a cabaret act, there's an MC, and suddenly, you know, he's welcoming her, and suddenly he goes, "And I see Witter Gardner and Hekia Parata in the audience. Kia ora to both of you. And Witter, you should know that I'm applying for the Māori trustee job." Time and place. Anyway, these are the things we know and love about ourselves. Actually, and knowing and loving that about us keeps us going in what are quite isolated, very challenging, difficult jobs all the time. But it's worth it. It is worth it, and it not only takes intelligence and skills and fortitude, it takes tenacity. It really does. It takes tenacity. Last year, as Minister of Women's Affairs, I was going around the country talking to mainly males, mainly Pārlangi boards, and then holding functions for women and saying we need more women on boards, we need to lift productivity. This is not about representation, this is about different lenses on the world and that different thinking technology which can't help but lead to innovation. I was very conscious that women would say to me afterwards, oh, but I've applied to be on a board and I didn't get selected. And I said, hey, I've run 4 campaigns in elections and I've never won yet. You know, I am tenacious about it. It is not just the gifts and skills and education we all have. It is determination, it is resilience, it is fortitude, it is self-belief. Going in all the time and making arguments for the difference that you know you can bring. And you do this despite criticism of your own people. You know, being hailed at Waitangi last weekend as John Key's little house nigger is not my idea of how I want to spend a weekend. But, you know, and the press said to me, oh, does that concern you? I've been getting it for 30 years and I can point to the exact differences I've made in particular areas. I can look with pride and think, if I hadn't been involved in that, maybe it wouldn't have happened in this way. Maybe we wouldn't have got this game. So I really respect the choices and the work that you are doing. And believe me, I know about your journey and the challenges of it, not in its specificity, but in its generality. I know what those challenges are, but this is an honourable cause because you are making a difference in small ways and in large, by yourself and incrementally, and it is absolutely critical not only for New Zealand-based Pacific communities, but for the growth and well-being of New Zealand. We have the privilege, I think, to either be born to citizenship of New Zealand or having chosen it. All of us are immigrants in some way, shape or form, except Ngāti Porou. We look So, we have an honourable task, and it's worth it because the price of citizenship is matched, I think, by the value of citizenship. And I wish you all the best in everything that you do. And I absolutely mean that I'm open to advice and guidance from any or all of you. I know that I'm kind of the second best thing to being the Minister of Pacific Island Affairs, that there is an aspiration in the Pacific communities that a minister from one of the Pacific Islands, because by the way, I have always considered myself to be a Pacific person. We can go back and look at memos I wrote in Foreign Affairs in the 1980s saying, when are we going to embrace our Pacific identity? When are we going to keep thinking that the Northern Hemisphere is the compass for what happens here? You know, when are we going to actually invest in relationships with our nearest neighbours to promote our economic, social, cultural security? Anyway, so I know that you'll all make a difference, and I commit to you that I will work my hardest to make a difference in the 3-year contract that I have in this role. And I thank you very much for your contributions and for the opportunity to meet you here this morning. Kia ora.
Are there any? Sorry, just thank you, Minister, for your address to the group. I wanted to ask, did you always aspire to be in Parliament, and or was it sort of opportunities that came up, and how did you know sort of which step to take?
Okay, thank you. No, I didn't. I didn't aspire to be. I have to say my whānau always did. Growing up, I always had high aspirations. So, but no, I didn't. I did grow up with a very strong ethic of service to the community, and that was a very big part of Sir Apira Nangata, you know, who lived next, my mother grew up next door to him, so he was a real figure. In fact, I thought he was still alive the whole time I was growing up, but he died nearly a decade before because, you know, everyone talked about him as if he was just down the road, this kind of thing. So I always had a strong sense of service. But I tell you what, and this is always really hard when I get asked these kinds of questions at groups like yours, because according to the literature, which no doubt your facilitator will be telling you, you know, you need to have a clear set of goals and timeline on it. I never have that, ever. I have just trusted that the